Welcome back to the Life Unfiltered podcast. My name is Emily.
I'm Caitlin, and today we are actually going to have Emily telling us a little bit of her story. She has a very unique experience. She actually has a childhood diagnosis that affects her almost her entire life. So,
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was born with what's called Turner syndrome, and I was not diagnosed with it until I was about 12. So I was born with it, but not diagnosed until I was about 12. They usually can diagnose you at birth because of very distinct physical qualities. Neck, there's web necks. There's just different midline issues that babies with Turner's experience, but I did not have any of the physical qualities other than just being a big baby. That's one of them. But my mom had gestational diabetes with me, so they didn't think that much of it. I was just a 9.5 pound baby. So I actually, growing up, knew that I was shorter than everybody, but I didn't think that much of it. I actually kind of thought it was fun. People would let me do piggyback rides, things like that. And when I was in first grade, my mom really noticed that I was significantly shorter than most of the kids in my grade, even the shortest one. My teacher took a very special interest in me and was kind of processing with my mom. They knew I had some learning disabilities, and so they were kind of processing what kind of things could this be. And my teacher actually came up to my mom, was like, hey, I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you this, but this might be something you talk to your doctor about. I don't know, but she might have Turner's. And so yeah, I was diagnosed at 12. They
So
sat.
when you were diagnosed, were you at was that something that the doctors told you, or were you at a doctor's office when you found out, or was that something they explained to your mom and dad, and your mom and dad set you down? Like, what did that look like at 12, being told that you have Turner's?
It looked a lot like my parents talking to the doctor about it at that point.
Yeah.
They went ahead and put me on growth hormone. So I had doctor's appointments pretty often because when you're on growth hormone, they want to make sure that you don't have cancer, that your thyroid is being checked. They were doing bone scans, which I still actually get to this day, just to make sure that my bones were growing in correctly, all that good stuff. And yeah, so I knew I had to take shots every day that most people didn't have to. So I got to be a really good nurse. I could pull out a syringe and mix my medicine. I knew it had to be refrigerated. So that was something when we were traveling, we had to make sure I had a refrigerator. I mean, it's honestly it's not too hard to figure out a refrigerator in your hotel, but things like that. And
do you still have to do medicines today?
No, so I actually stopped that. So they actually stopped my growth hormone late high school. So when I was like a junior or senior, and actually changed me out to just birth control. And that is kind of, to be honest, that's when I started having my period. I had to have a medically induced period, and just for my health and stuff, that like if my body wouldn't be doing that, then it's part of your bone growth and all that good stuff. So that's what they decided to do, going in, to college. They took me off the growth hormone because I was fully grown at that point. So
when you were in high school, you said you stopped doing growth hormones in high school and switched to birth control. When you were in high school, you said that you looked different, at least when you were younger. I luckily knew you in high school. I didn't think you looked that different.
No, I caught up.
Why? I was just like, oh, okay, you're just Sure, like that's just how it is.
Yeah.
Did you ever talk to any of your friends? Because we didn't have a conversation about it until we were in college, but did you ever
Mhm.
talk to any of your friends in high school about, what your life was like, what medicines you had to take, how this was going to affect you later on, like you potentially couldn't have kids, all of that, and did you ever talk
Yeah,
to them?
I I'm sure I did with my close friends. I
Mhm.
am pretty much an open book, so there was a lot of stuff that probably did discuss. As far as, I mean, my friends knew I had to take the growth hormone, and they knew that I couldn't have kids. It
Mhm.
wasn't something that was, I mean, talked about too much. As a high schooler, you're not really thinking about
Yeah.
your family moving on, or when you get older, what, I mean, I knew it in the back of my mind that I was going to not have biological children, but I don't think that it was ever something that I was thinking about at that point, or grieving, or
Yeah.
processing. I think that my siblings knew, and so from time to time there'd be things that we would talk about in regards to that, but it wasn't anything specific in high
Yeah.
school. That more
So,
became, I guess in high school I did talk to like significant others about it, just because as I started dating in high school, uh, the guys that I dated knew that I couldn't have kids before they dated me, actually, which
oh,
was
okay.
interesting to me. They just
So is
somehow,
that something like when you had interest in somebody and somebody else had interest in you, was that something like if they weren't in your immediate friend group, let's say, or weren't one of your close friends that you'd had that conversation with, was that something that you were like, hey, before you get into this, I just want you to know? Like, how did you navigate telling boyfriends that?
yeah. So I, that's an interesting question. So there's two guys that I really dated in high school, and both of them, because they were such close friends to me, they
Mm.
already knew
Oh,
that
okay.
I couldn't have kids. So one of them, actually, when he and I decided that we were going to start going out, we had a long conversation at his house about adoption. Weirdly, I think we had decided we were going to like adopt twins or whatever. I mean, we were
Yeah.
just high school kids being weird about that stuff, and trying to make it as normal as possible. It's a hard conversation to have as a high school guy,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so it it just worked out that they both knew, and I don't think I ever considered, um, I don't know, really telling any of the other guys that I was interested in, just because
Didn't
it
work
didn't
out.
cross my mind.
Yeah. So you made a comment about you hadn't totally like grieved that, like the ability not to have kids.
Yeah.
When do you think, when was it, was there a turning point or was there some moment that kind of triggered that grief of not being able to biologically procreate your own children? Like, when did that kind of start to set in for you?
I think when Cameron and I were in the weeds of adoption, and having to fill out all this paperwork and having to wait, and
Mhm.
there was just a lot of waiting and a lot of process that we had to go through that felt unfair
Yeah.
and felt unnatural. That was kind of when I started grieving, and feeling like a lot of people, including our attorney, that was dealing with us through the first year, just there wasn't a lot of positivity with the people that we were communicating with,
Yeah.
which is really, really hard. And that's, I think, when I first started feeling like I needed to grieve.
Mm. So so Cameron didn't go to high school with us.
No.
So when you met Cameron in college, how did you approach him with the fact, because you had already said like you had other interesting guys, but you never had told it to them, never explained it to them. So when you told Cameron, now that you're in college, now that you understand more of like what that looks like, because you weren't dating to date, it was dating intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
How did you have that conversation with Cameron, and how did you guys process through that together?
Yeah, so I actually had a long conversation with my mentor because I he was the first guy that I was serious with, that I wanted to date, that didn't know.
Mm.
And I didn't know how to go about telling him, like whether I told him before we started dating, after. I was like, I was afraid that it was going to kind of close him off to tell him and he wouldn't want to date me at all. But through the conversation with my mentor, we talked that, he deserves to know before he gets into it, and that it ultimately is going to be his decision at the end of the day, whether he wants to continue with the relationship or not. And so, actually, on the 4th of July, I think, yeah, I believe it was the 4th of July, the year we started dating. So 2018, 17, 18, 17.
I'm sorry.
He took it really well. We were actually just like, we were watching a movie, and then afterwards, I kind of told him like, hey, I want to talk about something kind of serious, and
Mhm.
kind of talked to him about it. And he wanted some time to process it with friends and his immediate friends. And he was very respectful. He actually asked me each time whether he could tell whoever it was. So I think there's only like two people that he told after,
Mhm.
before he really came back and processed with me. And their advice was, and they both knew, I think one of them had forgotten that I couldn't have kids, because she knew, but then, we hadn't talked about it in so long.
Yeah.
And just kind of told him, like, at least on this side of marriage, that you
Mhm.
guys aren't going through a whole bunch of IVF cycles. You guys aren't sitting there trying to um, just spend a bunch of money on stuff that is never going to work for you. And that you guys have answers beforehand is a blessing. You just need to decide whether that's something that you're okay with and that you're comfortable with. And so
Mhm.
ultimately he decided that, yeah, like this was something he was okay with. And we kind of had that conversation, not too seriously. We just knew, okay, adoption is okay and on the table for both of us. Um, and so as we kind of went through the process, uh, we I knew myself, and I knew that once I started, that I was going to be all in. And so we had the conversation before we got married that we were going to wait a year to
Mm.
do the paperwork, that we really wanted to focus on us as a couple, and, get to know us as, married people. And then after a year, we would start paperwork and see what happened. Uh, and
So when you had told him, were you guys already dating at that point, or were you just starting to get
no,
to know each other?
no, so we were about to make it official.
Okay.
So I believe I told him on, like I said, the 4th of July, and then I think the end of that month we made it official. We
Okay.
decided, we were counselors at a camp, and so we wanted to wait to make it official until after that,
Mm.
that we were dating, just with the kids and everything.
Yeah.
um, and then I think it was like the day we got back, like he made me a nice dinner and then asked me, and we kind of talked about all
Just
that. So
became exclusive.
yeah, so
Okay, so then And how long did you guys date before you guys got married? So like what was the time frame of him knowing that you couldn't have children to you guys starting the adoption paperwork?
Wait, say that one more time.
So like you guys started talking about how you couldn't have children July 4th, 2017,
Mm-hmm.
correct? And then when did you guys start your paperwork? So how long did he have to process all of that?
We started this spring, this the late summer. No. It was the late summer of 2020. It was during the pandemic.
So it was about 3 years.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then how, when, after he found out, and you said he went and told, or like went and processed with a couple of his friends and family, did you ever feel as if you had to explain yourself then to his family? Like, how did they process? Because it's no longer just affecting like you and him. At
Yeah.
that point now, you're like involving other people. So after he had processed that, did you go and have to process with them? Did they have questions for you? Like, what did that look like afterwards?
Yeah, so he actually ended up telling his family without me.
Oh.
I yeah, I I told was kind of nervous about them finding out. I wanted them to know me before finding out that I couldn't be able to that I wouldn't be able to have biological children. I mean, that's a big thing, especially for like I was mostly worried about his mother and kind of what she would think as a mother-in-law. And they were so just sweet about it. And I think his sister's first reaction was like, good, you can be like Thomas Rhett and his wife Lauren and get a baby from Uganda.
That
And
works too.
and and so they were just, I mean, extremely supportive. I don't think that there was ever a time that I felt like I had to explain myself. I think I was nervous when he first told them and then told me that he had already told them.
Yeah,
But at that point, I had gotten to at least meet them and know them, and they were just incredibly sweet moving forward and
that's awesome.
have just been incredibly supportive through the whole thing as we've gone through the paperwork, and they've just been patient with us. And same with my family. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard when there's situations that come up and go and stuff like that that make it hard for them.
Have
And
you ever
mostly,
had anybody not, because it sounds like you've had an amazing support system who's just accepted it and yes has had time to process on their own but has been really supportive to you, but have you ever had any negative or even neutral responses to it to where you were like, I've never had that before?
um,
Like even like in sorority, because I know you were in a sorority, so like did anybody, because it's something that you don't hear a lot of. And so have you ever had one
yeah,
of those experiences where you were kind of rubbed the wrong way or it just wasn't taken well?
not in that case. I think that the only time that I felt kind of weird about it, I didn't talk about it very often
Okay.
with in college, and I feel like it's a topic one that doesn't affect other people, so I think people mostly keep their mouth shut about that just because it doesn't affect them. They don't, I mean, they think it's interesting and they'll ask me questions, but it's never like a, well, you're just broken type thing. Um, I did at one point give a testimony about just, how God has been using this whole experience. And I mean, before I even dated Cameron, I gave this testimony about just the how God was using that to be able to talk to people, and just my diagnosis with Turner's in general has
Mm-hmm.
been something that is not something I can take back. It's not something that I can, you
Yeah, you
know,
can't change it.
right. And so I did have people after that kind of come, like, there's, I mean, a high school guy that came up and was like, oh, that was kind of weird. And I was like, Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, but I mean, everybody has been incredibly supportive, and that's been, I think, the biggest thing. And in fact, people, there's a severity to Turners,
Mm.
with both just like internally and externally.
Mm.
Um, and I had the most, from what my understanding is, I had the most severe internally, but not externally. And and so I have been able to like been able to teach. Like I had a career for 7 years, and there's a lot of people that have very severe Turners that, I mean, obviously maintain jobs, do jobs. Like it's a very normal. It's not
Yeah.
something that like affects that, but just it's been something that I've been able to process with other people that have Turners, and it's kind of been fun to see kind of where they've landed in their careers because a lot of them are teachers, um, and so yeah, just like feeling for them and processing what that looks like for
So
them.
so when you say that you had essentially worst case scenario internally, what does that mean?
Yeah, so it just means that I have no eggs at all.
Oh,
So Turners usually, uh, eh, usually babies that have Turners have very, very few eggs if they're born with eggs at all.
okay.
And some, uh, uh, when the doctors talk to me, they just wouldn't, like, I have health issues too with my heart. And
Mm-hmm.
so part of our story is that when we were looking at adoption, we started trying to figure out what other avenues we could do and whether we take sperm from my husband and an egg from someone else. And
So you
um
guys did consider like an egg donation
yeah, I mean, and
on
and
the
in
table?
different ways. So that was something that we talked to an attorney about, what our options were, things like that. And we just decided that it'd be just a little too weird for us, mostly because
Mhm.
because we were just didn't feel like that was the way we were feeling called to build our family. It
Mm,
wasn't
yeah.
a wrong way. It was just we felt that I had always thought about adoption. I had a heart for it. I really just felt like we could build a loving home for a child that may not have that, or may have a parent that needs help and support. And so that was kind of why we decided to go an adoption route versus the other ones, because one, I didn't have an egg, so it wouldn't be Cameron and I, and uh,
Yeah.
we just felt adoption was the better route for us.
Did
So
you ever consider when you did adoption, um, was it any and all children, or were you looking specifically for children in the US? And then when you are giving your options of, hey, this is, if you're looking in the US, this is possibilities. Did you rule out kids that had Turner syndrome or other things like that because you knew of like the difficulties that they may face? Was that something that you were open to, like moving forward with after battling it internally yourself?
yeah, so we decided that at least our first baby we wanted from birth.
Okay.
I mean, we had actually taken a foster class, um, just to see, kind of to prepare ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and we decided that the first baby that wanted we wanted from the hospital, just so that we could be parents from the very, very beginning and kind of go
Experience
through that.
the newborn and all of that.
Yeah, through that process, because I think we would have just been overwhelmed trying to figure out like an older kid, or like, a
Mhm.
toddler even. Just it's hard. And um and so that was our heart. And I actually was, growing up, I thought, okay, I would have one little boy from the US, we would adopt some little girl from overseas, and then we would come back and get another boy from the US. And um and I mean, we just haven't done that, but we have a little boy, Austin, that we adopted in July of 2022 from birth. We got him the day he was born. I actually cut his cord. And then we now have a 8-week old, and she's been with us since she was 6 weeks. And we actually ended up going to the hospital on Father's Day when she was born, and didn't end up. Mom decided she wanted to parent, and then changed her mind and decided that um, adoption was the route she wanted to go. And so that was something that we've now had the blessing of having 2 kids, and um, it's not for the faint of heart,
No.
but it's definitely worth it, and definitely something that is just been a huge blessing and experience, and something that we've been able to just really talk to people about, and go through hard seasons with them through it, just because we know how hard it is to be in the waiting. Just
Mm.
like if you could have kids naturally, there's a long time of just waiting. We waited for a long time after filling out our paperwork to get matched, um, and
And
we know what it's like.
do you
What?
have other, because you said you've connected with other um, community members that have also had Turner syndrome. Have you talked to many that have also done the adoption route or that now have kids, maybe not biologically theirs? And like, are you guys close? What is that like?
Um, I actually, the ones that I've known, there's not a ton of them, but the
Mhm.
ones I know, actually, none of them are married.
Oh.
So that has been something that I haven't asked them, but they just are single for whatever reason. And so, yeah, they just haven't gone through that. But uh,
So that's,
yeah,
I just find that really interesting, being told you can't have children and then having this community of, hey, like we're all kind of in the thick of it together. And then right now, as of right now, from the community members that and there's other people that could be listening, and if you're listening and you have Turners and you have children, please, please, please reach out to Emily. She would
yeah, I
love
would love to know.
um
I'd love to know that experience.
yes, I just think that's such a unique experience because not everybody goes through, having to be on growth hormones and then having to have a medically induced cycle and, all of these things and having to have that conversation with, somebody who you're like, I'm truly invested into this with you. By the way, I can't bear you children. And
Yeah,
so to come out of it with such, I think is such a wonderful story. Now, I've been with you through this roller coaster of your process, but to have 2 wonderful blessings at home is just, I mean, that's awesome. That is so,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so,
It's definitely been something that we have been able to just hold them close and know that this isn't something that everybody gets, and something that is really important to Cameron and I is just knowing that adoption and having to go through that is not a doesn't have to be a last resort.
mhm.
It's something that I've talked with some of my friends that even have been trying to get pregnant naturally. Like if this is something that you are passionate about, like it's not you're not giving up by going through the adoption process.
Absolutely.
It's just it's a different hard, if that makes sense. And
It is.
I just don't think that um that it gets the credit it deserves, because it is such a blessing to my husband and I. And anybody who has gone through the adoption process will tell you that it is hard, but it is so, so good. And it is something that um, is just a once, it's an experience that Cameron and I have been able to go through together,
Mm-hmm.
and has really bonded us to be able to process each and every situation that has come up and
Yeah, and
just be on the same page.
I'd love to eventually do an episode of, your adoption process, because you have some stories.
I have
There's some good, bad, and ugly stories. And so I'd love to share that on an episode and really just, hear all of everything that you've been thrown at. Like, because you have had very unique experiences, but I'd also love to hear Cameron's side and kind of,
yeah.
his side of being told, like, hey, I can't have children, like the one person that you're wanting to spend the rest of your life with, and kind of his perspective of, adopting. And I'd love to see kind of a compare of, your process, because you've been able to process it for so long, and then he had that 3 years to process, and like the different
Right.
aspects.
So that's the other thing, is that I, growing up, knew, right? I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have children. And I feel like I dealt with that throughout the years in my own way. My
Mm-hmm.
mentor, like I said, so she was actually pregnant around like when she and I became really, really close, and she like let me go through her pregnancy with her. And so she's a nurse. So I would like go over to her house and like listen to the baby, and just got to like hug her belly and feel the baby. And it was just a time that was so sweet, and
Yeah.
something that really, really healed me. Just as my senior year of high school, that happened. And I didn't know how much I needed it until later on, because that was one of the things that I grieved was, not being able to have a baby inside and be able to feel all the kicks and everything that a birth mother gets to. And so being able to experience that alongside of her, hear the heartbeat, I got to grieve some of that and process that. And Cameron at 20 something was thrown this wrench, and he has been amazing and
Mm-hmm.
uh, just so sweet about everything through the process. But yeah, it's something that I've gotten to grieve throughout ever since. And he's
All of your
just,
adulthood, at least.
yeah, and he's just kind of gotten, but thankfully we've gone through it when we were pretty young.
Yeah.
Most people go through the adoption process when they're older, um, and which is great still. But I just have really loved that as my friends have built families,
Mm-hmm.
that I have gotten to do that alongside of them in a different way,
Yeah.
and not in a natural way. Like most people, and that's what they're supposed to do. You're supposed to try for however long it takes you, and process that with your spouse. And we just kind of boom, adoption. And
Yeah.
so being able to now hopefully get to be that voice that people talk to, as our friends start saying like, hey, this might be a route that I want to go because my husband and I haven't been successful.
Yeah.
And that wasn't something that I had. I did not have someone my age that had gone through the adoption process. And so I was having to listen to all these women that were older and had gone through it in the 90s or whenever, or very, very early
Which
2000.
is so different, you
And
know?
I mean, it changes all the time. And
Yeah.
so being able to go alongside my friends, at some point, hopefully, if this is a path that they choose, has been something that I'm so excited about. And just be able to process with them and guide them through that. I'm actually doing that with a friend right now. And that has been so, so sweet to be able to grieve some of the to grieve some of that with her and to be excited, because we both have experienced the grief of like, like our sister's pregnant and
Yeah.
like
And
no
that's
baby for
something,
us.
yeah.
Yeah. And so just being able to talk about that and uh, love on each other and really just be vulnerable, and that has been super helpful. And friends like you guys that may not be going through the adoption process but have gone through loss has allowed Cameron and I to really just, be open and be able to have conversations with people about it. So,
Yeah, it kind of gives us that extra level of vulnerability for sure.
yeah.
So, well, I appreciate you more than you know for being so open, so transparent. There were things that I didn't know that you've shared tonight, so that's pretty cool.
Oh,
So I just want to say thank you. And if any of our listeners, or if you're watching, if you have any questions, or if you're, about to start that adoption process, or you don't know kind of what your next steps are and what to do.
yeah.
Not saying Emily's a full expert, but Emily has gone through quite a few. And she can kind of help. Hey, this is what we did and it worked for us. So please, please, please either comment on the video or comment on Instagram, reach out, let us know. And we'll get Emily in touch with you, because we are here for each other. But I'm looking forward to our next episode.
Woo! Yeah. Do you want to explain who our guests are going to be?
It's somebody super special. We have Kanan up next. He's going to give his side of being an angel dad, and what an angel dad is and what that entails. So you'll have to tune in and kind of hear what that is about.
Yeah, I'm excited to have a male on the show. And that's something that you and I both kind of talked about. And so kicking it off with your hubby will be
Yeah.
very, very sweet to be able to have just the start of some rawness for guys to talk about infertility on their end too. So
It will be interesting. We'll see how it all plays out. No promises there won't be any tears, but I will do my best. So you'll have to tune in a couple weeks and listen to that one and see how it goes.
All right.